Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio, your global feel-good radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 best-selling author, and again, your host who's bringing you wonderful information about how you can heal yourself naturally. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today is Ora Nadrich. Ora Nadrich is the author of Live True, a mindfulness guide to authenticity. She's also the president and founder of the Institute for Transformational Thinking. You can find out more about Ora Nadrich at her website, oranadrich.com. Welcome, Ora.
Hi, Catherine. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Ora, you founded the Institute for Transformational Thinking. What exactly is the Institute for Transformational Thinking?
The Institute for Transformational Thinking is an organization that's really committed to work about raising awareness of our thoughts. I have my first book, Says Who, How One Simple Question Can Change the Way You Think Forever, and now Live True, a mindfulness guide to authenticity, which are really devoted to thought transformation, if you will. My first book has a method that I created for transforming negative and fear-based thoughts, which really struck a chord in people and gave them the how-tos of how to change their thoughts. We think between 40 and 70,000 thoughts a day, and a good percentage of them are not supporting our well-being. And now with Live True, I've combined transformational thinking with mindfulness and how to really actualize the authentic self on a day-to-day basis. The Institute really creates work out in the world in the areas of health, wellness, education, the workplace. And so much of my work is devoted, again, to transformational thinking. It's bringing transformational thinking and thought awareness into the schools, into the workplace again, and into the areas of health and well-being.
Now, in my work as a medical intuitive healer, when I do medical intuitive readings, I read what I call the 5 levels of you. And they are your physical body, you know what that is, your energy body, which includes your chakras, your breath, and your acupuncture meridians. It also includes your emotional body, which is your emotions, which is the largest part of you. And then it includes a reading of what's happening to you on the mental level, which is your thoughts and your beliefs, which is what we're talking about. And finally, I also read what's happening on your soul level. And this is your soul level is what's the eternal part of you. Now, in my work, in my 26 years in full-time in natural healing, my understanding and experience is your soul controls your mind controls your emotions control your energy, and your energy controls the physical. So when we're working at this mental level, which is what we're talking about with the author Ora Nadrich today, when you examine, you begin by noticing and examining, what am I thinking? What am I believing? Then as you transform your thoughts and your beliefs, then you feel better, your emotions are more positive and uplifting, your energy's better, and then it filters down into the physical. So that's how it all kind of works together. Now, is this your second book, Live True, a mindfulness guide to authenticity?
It is my second book, Catherine, and I just want to chime into what you were saying that, I love the quote by French philosopher Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. He said, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And when you talked about that the soul really is the jumpstart in the way we function in the physical realm, so many people don't understand what I call connecting the dots, from a practical application of using your thoughts, because people are usually very affected by the thinking mind. And again, we think between 40 and 70,000 thoughts a day. That if people start to recognize, like what you said, the soul, or I love the quote by Teilhard de Chardin, about the spirit. You know, we don't wake up in the morning usually really acknowledging and honoring things like the soul and the spirit of our being. And I think what thought transformation helps people understand energetically is that the thoughts really do permeate out into the world, and they really affect everything that we do. So I really appreciate you mentioning the soul, because it's such an integral part of the connection between mind, body, and spirit.
Well, again, you are a soul. And, you know, as what we're agreeing here, you're a soul having a spiritual experience in a human body. But if you could think of your thoughts, the way I look at it is almost like you're the software. I was
Right.
talking to a client last week who had isolated herself. And I said, you know, you're actually starving your soul. And I pointed out that in her case, it all went down to her mental body and her thoughts and beliefs. And I said to her, you know, you can change those thoughts and beliefs just like you can change your shoes. And, you know, the first step is to realize, hey, I've been walking around in these shoes. They hurt my feet. They're causing all kinds of bunions, and I'm hobbling around in these shoes that don't work for me. And
Right.
I'm thinking these thoughts that are making me depressed and sapping my energy and depleting my personal energy to the point that I get sick.
Right.
And so it's like, let's change your thoughts.
Absolutely. And I love the shoe analogy. That is so good, you know, because it gives people a clear understanding of why do we continue what I say, harbor or accept. You know, I say we accept readily thoughts that are really negative and really undermining of our well-being, and yet we're so quick to accept them. And similarly, you wouldn't be wearing a pair of uncomfortable shoes, as you're saying. So I think when we give people the examples, I have a technique in my first book, says who, it's called the release and replace technique. I've used it all over and I've had such great results. It's very simple, actually. Sometimes things are too simple for people. They want it complicated. They want it difficult. They actually sometimes are attached to the pain. You know, they'll keep those painful shoes on, not even considering the fact that they can change them. And the release and replace technique is, it started with a Post-it that I have called Release and Replace. And when I'm in workshops or public speaking, I have people write down a negative thought. And I say, now take that piece of paper and crumple it up and throw it across the room. Well, if you saw the force that people throw that piece of paper, and I say, now look at that piece of paper. Do you want to uncrumple that and then take it back? They're like, no, absolutely not, with so much energy. And I say, okay, now write down its positive counterpart. Things like, I'm unlovable to I'm lovable. And I say, when you write down the positive counterpart, do you want to crumple that up and throw it across the room? I get the same resounding no. And so this whole idea of changing your shoes, replacing your negative thought for a positive thought, when you start to really show people that this is something that they can experience daily, they get the aha moment of like, wow, I have been accepting something negative and uncomfortable for so long. I have a choice and I can change this.
Yeah. And going back to the conversation that I had last week about the client, because I said, your problem is largely on the mental level. And she had experienced a chronic exhaustion and chronic pain. But in her case, she had the belief that the world was a scary, unfriendly place. And I said to her, you know, Einstein said, the most important question is whether or not you consider the universe a friendly place. Because if your belief that is that the universe is a friendly place for you, then everything that happens to you, you hold and experience as it's your highest good. So, you know, if you have an accident or an illness or some supposedly unfortunate event, you're looking for the blessing. You realize that you're still being blessed by it. And it really does go back to the thoughts that you're programming yourself with. So as I was talking to her about this shoe analogy, I said, you know, in the spring, I went through my closet and I have all these shoes that were sort of close but not there. And they looked cute, but if I wore them for more than half an hour, my feet would start to hurt. And so I was literally examining my shoes. Are they supporting me? And we can do the same thing with your beliefs. You may have had these beliefs for a long time. You may believe that you're fat, you're ugly, you're unlovable, that the universe is scary and threatening to you, or that no one will ever love you the way you are. And you have to ask yourself, are these beliefs supporting me? Are they helping me?
Right? Do they support your well-being? I love the example of curating our thoughts. And as I look at your beautiful wall of art behind you, I say our thoughts, we curate them. We pick and choose the thoughts that we want to hold in our mind's eye. And when you think of the analogy of a museum, they curate the best art of an artist. And when you walk into a museum, you expect to see absolute magnificence. You're not walking in to see the worst of the artist's work. You're there to see the best of the artist's work. And the same is for our thoughts. We can pick and choose our thoughts very carefully, very selectively. What I want the listener to also know, Catherine, is that because we think such a huge amount of thoughts a day, people say to me, wow, you do all this work with negative thoughts and transforming them. Do you have negative thoughts? I say, of course I do. That's part of the thinking process. Negative thoughts are going to come up. What you want to be cognizant of is what to do when they come up, that you have a choice to release a negative thought and replace it again with its positive counterpart. And even to use the analogy that you had of the discomfort that a thought can cause us, like a shoe that doesn't fit well, that people have to understand that they have a choice all the time. And I know sometimes that's not so easy to implement, but with practice, you become better at this. You start to become very aware, and that's what mindfulness does. Mindfulness gives us an awareness of like, I just thought something negative. Is that thought useful for me? It's not making me feel very good. I can change that thought from I'm unlovable to I'm lovable. Yes, I am. I'm lovable. And with that kind of practice, you start to really default to, I say, healthy thinking habits, which is very neuroscientific. We have the ability to create new neural pathways in our brain. It's fascinating. And we don't have to default to old habits of thinking. We can literally create new pathways of thinking, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, and thank you for complimenting me on my art. These are the covers for my 7 Amazon #1 best-selling books.
Beautiful.
Thank you. So, you gave an exercise, and we're providing useful information for our audience. So here's a way that I recommend that people do it. So one of the things I have people do is, let's say you went through a stressful time in your life. You got sick, you got a divorce, you lost your job, or what have you. Write the story, and write the story with as much truth as you can muster. So everything that you're writing is absolutely 100% true. Then read the story. And as you read the story, notice how you feel actually reading that story. So if nobody likes me, I'm miserable, everybody hates me, nothing works out for me, whatever it is, as you feel these negative feelings, that indicates to you where you can change your mind and where you can change your story. So write the story, read it, notice the negative emotions that show up, and then rewrite the story. Now, when you rewrite the story, I tell people, continue to tell the truth. Like you don't want to lie to yourself. Your soul knows what's really going on. But tell your story as positively as you can in a way that actually uplifts you. So maybe you focus on, what did I learn from this experience? Like, I am learning how to love myself, and I'm learning how to be open and available. And I'm learning to, see everything that happens to me as a blessing. So write it again. and then read it again. And as you read it again, it's like maybe you're going to start feeling better and better as you reread it. And then again, every time you notice where you're, feeling sad or depressed or grief or regret or anger or fear or anxious, whatever it is, keep rewriting the story so that the story that you end up telling yourself about what happened only brings up peace, only brings up calmness, and only brings up insight, awareness, and literally getting to the point where you feel blessed by everything. And this,
That's so helpful, Catherine. That is really, really helpful. And it actually really is so compatible to a meditation that I have in Live True. I have 30 meditations in my book, one after each chapter. And I talk about the time forms, if you will, the time frames, past, present, and future. My book is really a mindfulness guide to understanding present moment awareness, and that the only real time there is in the present moment. The past is come and gone, it no longer exists, and the future is not here yet. Now, people have had very difficult experiences out of the past, and it still feels very present for them now. And I have something called meditation for present moment awareness, memory, and that it's guiding you in a meditation where you can actually rewrite what happened to you. That's not diminishing what happened to you. It's not denying what happened to you. And it's not acknowledging what happened to you. Your experiences are real for you. But what I wanted really the reader or the listener to come into awareness of is that if something that you went through that was traumatic happened to you today, what would you do with that experience in the present time, which is real time? Today, if you envision what happened to you out of the past, if let's just say somebody was about to come forward and hurt you and abuse you, to see yourself in the power position, to see yourself not in the vulnerable position, you are writing the script. And you might write something very differently. You might write that you got into your car and drove away. You might write that you have supernatural powers like Wonder Woman or Superman, and that you were able to literally fly away. I mean, as surreal and magical as that may sound, and I like to encompass all ways of empowerment, do you know? So the memory in present time meditation really lets you connect to that experience and who you are today. And who we are today is not who we were in the past, nor who we will be tomorrow. And it's a tremendous meditation of empowerment because so many people feel stuck in that experience. And what they're doing is they're identifying with the self that they were. And what you want to do is to connect to the self that you are today and really drop into how powerful you are. Very empowering meditation.
yeah, and I really appreciate what you're saying, Ora Nadrich, because to me, when part of this examining your own story is asking yourself, who's telling the story? Who is telling the story? So what do I mean by that? Is my victim telling the story? So how can I tell if my victim's telling the story? If I'm telling the story and it's like, oh, poor me, this person did that to me and this person hurt me and this is how I was injured. Well, then my victim's telling the story. On the other hand, I could be, my saboteur could be telling the story. So if I'm in self-destruct, it's like, I made so many mistakes. I really messed up my life. I've just damaged everything and everybody around me. I hate myself. Well, if that's who's telling the story, that's your saboteur. So you want to listen to your story and ask yourself a very simple question. Am I telling this story from the point of view of my empowered soul? Because your soul is actually indestructible.
Right.
Right? Your soul lives actually in a state of bliss and divine awareness and sees a bigger picture than your ego does.
Right.
So that's another way you can write the story is, again, notice if your victim, your child, your saboteur, or some other some personality that's not helpful to you is telling this story, some aspect of your shadow. and your ego.
Right.
And then say,
Yeah.
how would my soul tell this story?
And tell the story. How would your soul tell the story today? What are the words that you would use today? If you were speaking to someone, let's say, that hurt you or harmed you, what would you say to them today? And even though you may not have the opportunity to say it to them in the physical, that they are across from you and in real time, like you and I are in, you uttering those words into the universe or visualizing it in a meditation, where you are literally the author of rewriting that story, you can see yourself in present time actualizing something very different. And it's really powerful, do you know, because you become like an alchemist. You really start to, you know, understand the power of time, and that you can rewrite and continue to write things always, you know, on the life continuum. Do you know, it's really amazing, isn't it, Catherine? Like what we are able to do and continue to do on the life journey.
Right. And once you realize that your mind creates your emotions, and your emotions create your energy, and your energy creates your physical, then working at this mental level, like Ora Nadrich is talking about, is very, very powerful. Now, Ora Nadrich, your second book, Live True, A Mindfulness Guide to Authenticity, you're talking about living authentically. What does it mean to live authentically? What does that mean exactly?
Well, I think that we pretty much know the definition of authentic or authenticity, and that means real, genuine, you know, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. But what we have to ask ourselves is, are we living our lives as our most real, genuine self? You know, many people don't connect to that within themselves. They feel they have to be someone or something that someone else expects them to be, or that their family expected them to be when they were growing up. You know, the shoulds and the you have to be this person. So, you know, as a young person, you come into the world as this pure, true essence. This is your true nature, which it can also be called the Buddha nature. It is the spirit, is the soul that you talk about, one of my favorite words. We come into this body in this incarnation as unique individual spirits. There's no other Catherine, there's no other Ora. And then along the way on the life journey, we start to lose sight of who we really are. And this can happen as early as childhood, and that's usually when it happens. The first time someone tells you something on the schoolyard, you're not, you know, you're not attractive, you're stupid, you know, you're not good at sports, you're never going to amount to anything. It could be a family member, an authority figure, a teacher, somebody the first time that tells you something and it literally feels like someone has, you know, slugged you in the stomach. It's just knocked the wind out of you. And I think that if we all go back to the first time someone said something to us that really hurt us deep in our solar plexus, where we thought, oh, you know, maybe I'm not this beautiful, loving, you know, soul full of light and love. And we believed what was told to us. And then we continue the life journey thinking that we're something that we're not. So what you start to feel, as I call in my first book, Says Who, the symptoms or the side effects of thoughts that we believe that aren't true. And the next thing you know, you're living life out of balance. You're feeling that something is deeply wrong. And where it's wrong is on a soul level, is on a spirit level. You're not feeding your soul. You're not feeding the authentic self. So what I do with Live True is I bring people into the understanding of how to be present with who you are today and start to lift the veils of the inauthentic self, so that you can return home to the true essence of who you are, which is so beautiful. You know, for me, when I talk about the spirit and the soul, you know, when I look at an audience, I see that, and I'm sure you do with your work, Catherine. I see their spirit. I don't just see the color of their hair or the color of your eyes. You do work on that deep level as well, that our spirit is so beautiful. Our soul is so beautiful. So it gives people practical tools, if you will, how to connect again to the authentic self, how to start living authentically, how to, maybe not be such a people pleaser, how maybe to learn how to take time for yourself where you're nurturing who you really are. Maybe you have forgotten how to give yourself love. Maybe you're not really giving yourself much self-care these days. Maybe you need to rediscover the things that made you happy when you were a young child. For me, I used to love to roll around in fields of grass. I used to love to look up at the sky and see clouds moving across the sky. I try to do things in nature that reconnect me to what gave me those feelings of wholeness when I was a child. So it's a wonderful guide to help you remember your most authentic self.
Right. And, I want to point out for our audience that if you're not living your authentic self, you have to realize that you're in survival mode. So let me give an example of this. So you basically have to be safe, and you have to feel safe at a super deep level in order to be real, right? So recently, for example, I worked with an actor, and he's never been able to be real. And this conflict between who he really is at the soul level, and he's a wonderful person, and who he's been literally acting is such an inner conflict that he's struggling with terrible addiction. So again, if you're not your authentic self and you're not living from that point of view, what are some of the symptoms? Some of the symptoms would be that you're living from your mask. So for example, this person, he was so good at playing roles and wearing masks that he became a professional actor. The problem is that he's been acting his whole life. He doesn't know how to be real with anybody. He doesn't know how to accept his feelings and show up as he really is. Mm-hmm. So you're going to be wearing masks. If you are suffering from depression or anxiety, I promise you that there are thoughts that you are holding just like that aren't serving you. Just like the shoes that you may have been walking around in, and maybe they sort of fit, but not really. So depression or anxiety or a deep sense of guilt or regret or a tremendous amount of anger or rage. If you're dominated by these emergency emotions and in survival mode on an ongoing basis, and if you don't feel safe being real anywhere, then again, you're not living your authentic self, and you can examine your thought patterns.
Yes, I also want to say to that, Catherine, so true in that, perpetuating the inauthentic self and wearing the masks or keeping yourself veiled, what you're doing is that you're allowing for people to like you and even love the inauthentic self. And as I say, it's a lot harder to be inauthentic than it is to be real. At some point, you're going to feel completely depleted, and create all sorts of symptomology around inauthenticity. And the reason for that, just at a core level, aside from just survival needs, is that we really need to drop into self-love. We really need to go deeper into where is the lack of self-love, which again is thought-based. Because if you believe that you're not lovable, then you're not going to really allow for yourself to be seen because you don't feel worthy of that. So carrying on living falsely or inauthentically by holding the veils up and wearing the masks, you're really not allowing for somebody to see you for who you really are. And that's something that, as frightening as it may be and as difficult as it may be, and I like to acknowledge that because this is a journey of self-realization. This is a journey of awakening, and it's not always an easy one. I don't want to say it's just, a day in the park all the time or a bed of roses. It's not. And I commend anybody who steps forward and wants to take this path, set on the path of self-realization. We are all more similar than we are, not similar, in that we all have insecurities. We all have things about us. Jung called it the shadow. The darker aspects of the unconscious the aspects of ourselves that we may not want to look at and we may not like. And I really drive that point home and live true. I say, be willing to take a deep dive into the bottom of the sea of your psyche. There may be wreckage there and even remnants of a sunken ship, and I use that metaphorically, but there is also a treasure chest there just waiting for you to open up and see the treasures that are hidden there. You must shine a light on the darker aspects of what you don't like or love about yourself and start to heal that and start to really welcome self-love about yourself. And what starts to happen is you start to remove the masks and you start to lift the veils and say, this is who I am. Love me for who I am. I just want to also share that I have somebody that I know very well who really grappled with addiction for a very, very long time. And, you know, sometimes addicts keep it very hidden, as we know. Do you know? And they were very vulnerable with me. And I just looked at them, and it was not easy for them to be vulnerable. And I said, you look so beautiful right now. You are so real. You are so there. You are so present. And they started to cry because I said, you need to know that your most real, authentic self is probably the most lovable thing about you. So it's taking out those thoughts and those beliefs that, again, changing the thought of I am not lovable to I am lovable, and a good mantra or affirmation in a meditation to say, and I have it in my book, I am ready to let myself be seen. I am ready to let myself be loved for who I really am.
Yes. And I would say, as a medical intuitive healer, that living with all these masks is exhausting. And being inauthentic, you know, pretending to be somebody who you're actually not is a huge hidden undiagnosed cause of chronic fatigue. And because it takes so much less effort to be who you really are, to speak your truth, to feel how you really feel, and to express that, versus carrying around all this energetic armor and pretending. And the other thing, as far as love, and again, how you can tell if you're not authentic, is if you have had trouble in your personal relationships, finding a partner, keeping partners, you're always feeling lonely in your relationships because you don't feel seen. If you don't feel seen and you're having trouble forming or making relationships, you may not be showing up as your authentic self. And when we build up these very elaborate facades and wear these masks constantly, even when people do love us, then we don't really trust it, because we think, well, they really love, you know, this pretense. They love the mask. They don't really love me.
That's right. On a deep level, you're going to know that. On a very deep level, you're going to know that the love is inauthentic, that the love is not based on realness. It's not based on you bringing your most authentic self into a relationship and seeing that someone loved you maybe for who you're really not. And again, it really is very exhausting. And it's something that you could start today. You could start to implement this today. You know, people need practical tools and skills and techniques so they can say, well, what do I do? You know, how do I start to be real today? You know, do one thing today that is real. Maybe be unafraid to say something that's truthful to a loved one without feeling that if you say this to them, oh, they're not going to love me. Oh, they might be mad at me. You know, you're going to have to find that out eventually, or else you're going to be living continuously inauthentically. And do you want to do that and pay a price for that?
Now, Ora Nadrich, author of Live True, A Mindfulness Guide to Authenticity, why is your message of living authentically especially necessary for the times we're living in now?
Such a good question, Catherine, and thank you for asking me that. Do you know, we're living in a challenging time, I feel. There's so much going on in the world today, and people are more stressed out than ever before. You know, I've written mindfulness articles for health magazines and even bringing mindfulness into the workplace. the World Health Organization just diagnosed workplace burnout as a disease. People are stressed out, and because we are in the physical body, as you know, people are feeling things. You know, they're imbibing this type of stress. Anxiety is at an all-time high. We have an opioids crisis. People are self-medicating. People don't know what to do with all the turmoil and the stress and the conflict that is stirring inside them, and they need the help. And I feel that right now, especially at a time when we are, hearing things like fake news, the word fake is coming up all over the place, that people are struggling with what is real, what is not real, what is true, what is not true. What can I believe in? What should I believe in? We must start with ourselves. We must be able to know what is real and what is true within ourselves. If we don't know who we are, if we don't lift the veils and remove the masks of inauthenticity, then we're not going to be able to know what's outside of ourselves, to know if it's real or not. And we must, because, the planet needs our help. We as a collective need to really wake up to the fact that we need to know that our role here on this planet is an important one. We can't live in falseness. We can't live in duplicity. We can't live in perpetuating that which doesn't work anymore. I love the quote. I say it all the time. The beautiful quote by Gandhi: be the change you wish to see out in the world. The change starts with us. That's why transformational thinking is so important, especially during these times. It will support your wellness. It will support your well-being. It will make you not feel alone. To know that there are things that you can do to change on a fundamental core level so that you can live the life that you are meant to live, not in darkness and not in despair and not in perpetual suffering. You can change your life today, and my change will reverberate out into the world, and each and every one of us can change and affect the change out in the world that Gandhi spoke of so eloquently.
Yes. Now, here at the Natural Healing Show, of course, what we're wanting to do is to be as healthy and as happy as possible. So let me give you some examples from the medical literature of extreme examples, if you will, of what happens when you're not authentic. So, for example, there's well-researched case studies of multiple personality disorders. And this personality who shows up as this aspect of the inauthentic self maybe will have migraines, and this other aspect of the personality will not. So you have to understand that the more masks you wear, and each mask has a belief pattern and a belief system that goes along with it, again, is going to translate all the way down into your energy. It's definitely going to be exhausting. So if you find yourself with chronic fatigue, you have to ask yourself, where am I not being real? And that's going to translate all the way down into physical disease. Now, Ora Nadrich, you talk about mindfulness, and a lot of people think they know what that means. What, in your opinion, does mindfulness mean?
Mindfulness is the practice of being present. It has its origins 2,500 years ago in Buddhism. I imagine that the Buddha was very present on the path of enlightenment, that we need to be present. We need to be comfortable. We're talking about the inner journey. We're talking about going within. We're talking about the inquiry. We're talking about examining who we are. We're talking about supporting our wholeness, supporting our wellness. Mindfulness helps us with that. Mindfulness is an inherent quality that each and every one of us has, like kindness and compassion. That doesn't mean we practice it all the time. So it helps guide us. I call it a guide because what mindfulness does is the more we show up in the moments of our life, the more we say, hey, I want to be fully here. I want to be really present. I don't want to be pulled into the past and lament what happened and it's keeping me stuck in the past, or I'm busy thinking about the future and what might or could happen. There's a research out of Harvard recently that says that our mind wanders almost 50% of the time. And what that tells us is that we're not very present. We're so busy, worrying and lamenting and worrying and lamenting that we can't drop into, what do I have to experience in the moment of now? What does this moment have to offer me? This moment is a gift because you're alive in it. It's another day of being alive. And I really encourage people to wake up and start your mindfulness practice from the minute you wake up in the morning. Don't just jump out of bed like a ball out of a cannon. Wake up in the morning, open your eyes, look around, put your hands on your chest, feel the rising and falling of your breath. That's having a mindful awareness of, I'm in this moment, I'm grateful for being alive in this moment, and I'm going to start my day in gratitude. This is the way we start to implement mindfulness. It's being in the moment with total awareness, with acceptance, non-judgment, and I like to say the cherry on top is with self-love. Now, a lot of people out there listening might be like, whoa, that's a tall order. That's a lot for me to do. I get that. But what happens is when we get swept up in the current of doing and we don't give ourselves a timeout or a pause during our day, we are constantly on the hamster wheel of life. And again, mindfulness is the practice of being present. So the way in which you can do that today is spend a couple of minutes connecting to being here. Spend a couple of minutes not rushing through an interview. You and I have spent lovely time together, Catherine. I'm sure the interview is soon to be over. And we have both been, I don't want to speak for you, but I have been only here with you. I am here because I want to be. I'm here because I value this interview. I'm here because I want to bring the best of myself to this experience. If we can bring the best of ourselves to all the moments of our lives, we do things like rush through eating. We barely look at people in the eyes when we're talking to them. I have something in Live Truth called mindfulness repair. And what that does is it says, maybe in the morning you're really hurried and rushed. Next thing you know, you're on the freeway or you're on the way you commute, be it a bus, a train, a plane, and you go, wow, I didn't even say I love you to my partner. Let me circle back to them. That's mindfulness repair. Let me circle back to them the moment I can to say, maybe via text, if you or on the phone, hey, sweetheart, I'm sorry I was so rushed this morning. I love you. We are so rushed, we miss some real precious moments along the way. And this is practicing mindfulness.
Now, in my work as a medical intuitive healer, one of the things that I can read is what percent of your energy is in the past, what percent of your energy is in the now, and what percent of your energy is in the future. So let me tell you what that tells me about you. If the majority of your energy is in the past, you're literally still digesting and processing on the physical, energetic, emotional, mental, and spiritual levels, all the stuff that has happened to you in the past. And when you're stuck in this past, again, that's less energy that you have in the present. And again, this is going to lead to depression and exhaustion and rage and regret and self-blame and lack of forgiveness. So if you're feeling any of those feelings, you're not pulling your energy into the present. And people ask me, well, how do I pull my energy into the present? And it's super simple. It's just your attention. Wherever your mind goes, that's where you are. Sometimes people ask me, well, Catherine, how do you do medical intuitive reading? I'm saying it's simple. I just focus on the person. I go into wherever they are. They're in London, they're in Norway, they're in South America. I literally bring my awareness there. And most people are not aware of how powerful your mind is, because wherever your mind is, that's where your energy is. And you can become more mindful simply by directing your mind and your energy and your focus. And again, if you're in the future, then you're creating pictures, either for better or worse. And again, once you realize how powerful your mind is, you want to create positive pictures and again, bring it back to the present.
Right. And one of the ways, Catherine, again, the practical application of these teachings, these skill sets is that our mind is going to wander. This isn't a quick fix. It doesn't happen just like that. So let's say you're in conversation with somebody and your mind starts to leave the present connection that you're having with somebody, and you start to go, oh gosh, I have that meeting later. Oh, I'm so nervous about it. I hope I don't mess up. You catch it. You have a mindful awareness of, I just went into a future possible outcome of something that isn't even here yet. Let me bring my focus and awareness back to the present and not get caught up in the worry of something that might or could happen. And the more we start to bring ourselves, the beauty of mindfulness is it not only keeps us present, but it makes us aware when we're about to go out of the present. And it helps us, it's like an inner, voice that goes, hey, psst, where'd you go? Where'd you just go? You just went out of the moment. And you start to have this relationship with your own thinking mind, that you're in a productive dialogue as opposed to just a critical or fear-based or worrying dialogue with your thoughts, worrying about the future, lamenting and victimizing yourself about the past. So what helps you with this, present understanding of mindfulness is that you can go, oh, there I go. My mind is starting to wander. Let me gently bring myself back to the present moment and what's happening right now.
You've been listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio, your global feel-good radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 bestselling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Our guest today, Ora Nadrich, author of Live True, a Mindfulness Guide to Authenticity. You can find out more about Ora Nadrich and her wonderful work at oranadrich.com. And remember, your mind is the builder, and you can build positive emotions, great energy, and a healthy body through your mind. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.